The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never felt so cold. Representatives from 47 different worlds sat in their floating chairs, their faces showing the same terrible fear. The holographic display in the center of the room showed a map of their galaxy, but now large sections of it were turning black. One by one, entire star systems were disappearing. Admiral Keth stood at the speaking platform, his blue-scaled hands shaking as he pointed to the display. He had fought in many wars during his long life, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The other council members watched him with desperate eyes, waiting for answers he did not have. "The reports are all the same," Keth said, his voice barely steady. "The Devourers have returned." A wave of frightened whispers filled the hall. The Devourers were creatures from their oldest nightmares. Ancient machines that had nearly destroyed all life in the galaxy thousands of years ago. Everyone thought they were gone forever, destroyed in the Great War that their ancestors had fought long before any of them were born. "Show us," demanded Counselor Vex, her crystal body glowing with nervous energy. She represented the Alterian Collective, one of the most advanced civilizations in the known galaxy. If even she looked scared, then things were truly hopeless. Keth touched a control, and the display changed. They could see recordings from the Outer Rim worlds, the frontier systems that served as early warning posts for the core civilizations. The images showed massive black shapes moving between the stars, each one larger than their biggest cities. These were the Devourer ships, and they were nothing like the elegant vessels that the galactic races preferred to build. They consume everything, Keth explained, as the recording showed a Devourer ship approaching a small mining world. Planet, the orbital stations, even the star's energy. Nothing is left behind. The council members watched in horror as the black ship extended. Thousands of mechanical arms toward the planet. Within hours, the world was gone, torn apart and consumed piece by piece. The star itself grew dimmer as strange machines built around it, stealing its light and heat. "How many systems have we lost?" asked Counselor Zara from the Meridian Union. Her people were known for their calm nature, but even she could not hide the fear in her voice. 17 in the past month, Keth replied. "At their current speed, they will reach our core worlds within 1 standard year." The number hit the council like a physical blow. 17 entire solar systems, each home to billions of living beings, simply erased from existence. And this was only the beginning. "What about our fleets?" demanded General Thox of the warrior clans. His people were the closest thing the galaxy had 2 professional soldiers, but even he looked uncertain. "Surely our combined forces can stop them." Keth's expression grew even more grim. "We have tried. The 3rd Fleet engaged them at the outer marker 3 days ago." He paused, struggling with the words. There were no survivors. Another wave of shocked silence filled the hall. The 3rd Fleet had been one of their strongest military forces. Equipped with the most advanced weapons and shields that galactic science could produce, if they could not even scratch the Devourers, what hope did anyone have? "Their ships adapt," Keth continued. "Our energy weapons hit their shields, and within seconds, those shields learn to absorb that specific type of energy completely. Our plasma cannons become useless. Our particle beams do nothing. It is like they are learning from every attack we make." Counselor Vex leaned forward in her floating chair. "What about the ancient weapons? The ones from the first war against?" "The Devourers lost to time," Keth said sadly. "The knowledge died with our ancestors. We've become too civilized, too peaceful. For 1,000 years, we have built ships for exploration and trade, not for war." The truth of his words settled over the council like a heavy blanket. In their long age of peace and prosperity, they had forgotten how to fight. Their ships were beautiful works of art, designed to carry diplomats and scientists between the stars. Their weapons were meant for ceremonial displays and police actions against small criminal groups. None of it was enough to face an enemy like the Devourers. "There must be something we can do," whispered Counselor Nehru of the Peaceful Worlds Alliance. "Some weapon we have forgotten, some ally we have not considered." The hall fell silent again. Everyone was thinking the same thing, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Finally, It was old Counselor Zara who spoke the forbidden words. "The humans," she said quietly. The reaction was immediate and violent. Representatives jumped to their feet, shouting in dozens of different languages. "Those barbarians. We expelled them for good reason. Their violent ways have no place in civilized space." But as the shouting died down, the truth remained. 50 years ago, humanity had been banned from galactic society. The Council had declared them too aggressive, too unpredictable, too willing to solve problems with violence instead of peaceful negotiation. They had been sent back to their small corner of space and told never to return now. As death machines swept across the galaxy, those same violent humans might be their only hope. The message from the Galactic Council arrived at Luna Station on a cold Tuesday morning. Admiral Lee Minho was drinking his coffee and reading reports from the outer colonies when his communication officer, Lieutenant Park Soo-Yang, handed him the encoded transmission. "Sir, this came through the old diplomatic channels," she said quietly. "It's marked as urgent from the Council's emergency assembly." Minho took the datapad and read the message twice. Then he set down his coffee cup and laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Round the command center, other officers stopped their work to listen. 50 years, Minho said to no one in particular. 50 years they told us we were too violent for their perfect galaxy. Now they want our help. Captain Kim Nari looked up from her tactical display. She had been born on one of humanity's frontier worlds, a place where children learned to shoot before they learned to read. The scars on her arms told the story of the Centauri mining wars, conflicts that the Galactic Council had dismissed as primitive human aggression. "What do they want, sir?" she asked. "The Devourers are back," Minho replied, handing her the message. "And apparently our primitive weapons are looking pretty useful right about now." The room fell silent. Everyone had heard the stories about the Devourers from their grandparents. Ancient machines that had once threatened all life in the galaxy. Most people thought they were just legends, scary stories to tell children around campfires. "Is it?" asked Commander Jang Wubin, the station's chief engineer. His hands were permanently stained with grease and oil from working on the massive defense platforms that surrounded Earth's solar system. Minho pulled up a star chart on the main display. Red markers showed the locations of recent Devourer attacks, and the pattern was clear. They were moving steadily toward the galaxy's center, consuming everything in their path. "Bad enough that they're willing to talk to the monsters they kicked out of civilized space," Minho said grimly. 3 days later, the alien delegation arrived. Admiral Keth stepped off his diplomatic shuttle looking nothing like the proud warrior who had once told humanity they were not welcome among the stars. His blue scales had lost their shine, and his golden eyes were filled with fear. "Admiral Lee Keth began formally, the Galactic Council requests—" "Stop right there," Minho interrupted, rising from his chair. The human admiral was shorter than the alien, but his presence filled the room. "Let me tell you what I think happened. Your perfect, peaceful galaxy ran into something that didn't care about your diplomatic solutions. Something that couldn't be reasoned with or negotiated with. And now you remember that sometimes violence is the only answer." Keth's scaled face flushed a deeper blue, but he said nothing. Captain Park Ji-won stepped forward. Her combat armor was scarred from dozens of battles that the Council had ignored or condemned. "Admiral, our scouts report Devourer movement toward the Kepler defense line. If that falls, they'll have a clear path to the core systems." Minho studied the tactical information on his wrist display. While the galactic civilizations had spent centuries building beautiful cities and elegant starships, humanity had never stopped preparing for war. Every human world was defended by orbital weapons platforms. Every human ship was built to fight and survive in the cold darkness between stars. "You know what the funny thing is?" Minho said to Keth, while you were all enjoying your 1,000 years of peace. "We kept building. We kept training. We kept preparing for the day when something terrible would come out of the dark." He gestured to the viewport, where the human defense fleet was clearly visible. Unlike the smooth, artistic curves of alien ships, human vessels looked like what they were: instruments of war. Angular holes covered in armor plating, weapon ports bristling from every surface. Engines powerful enough to ram through enemy, Formations, if necessary. Every battle you condemned us for taught us something new, Minho continued. The Martian rebellion showed us how to fight in zero gravity.
Asteroid mining wars taught us about void combat.
The Centauri crisis made us experts at fighting an enemy that adapted to our tactics. Captain Kim Nari pulled up files on her datapad. We've been monitoring galactic communications for 50 years, sir. We know exactly what these devourers can do. Their adaptive shields stop energy weapons, but our intelligence suggests they haven't encountered kinetic projectiles in thousands of years. Minho nodded slowly. Human weapons were considered primitive by galactic standards because they relied on solid projectiles instead of elegant energy beams. Railguns that fired chunks of metal at incredible speeds, nuclear torpedoes that could crack asteroids in half, mass drivers that could launch telephone pole-sized slugs across solar systems. We never stopped being soldiers, Admiral Keth Minho said finally. While your people learned to be diplomats and scientists and artists, we stayed angry and paranoid. And ready for war? We're the monsters you were afraid of. He walked to the viewport and looked out at the human fleet. Ships named after Earth's great cities and battles, crewed by men and women who had grown up knowing that someday, something, would try to destroy everything they loved. Lucky for you, Minho said quietly, we're about to be your monsters. The space around Kepler Station was filled with the wreckage of alien ships. For 3 days, the combined fleets of a dozen civilizations had thrown everything they had at the approaching devourer constructs. Their beautiful energy weapons had lit up the darkness like fireworks, but when the light faded, the enemy ships were still coming. Captain Choi Hoon-sik stood on the bridge of the Bison's Hammer, watching the alien retreat through his tactical display. The human fleet had arrived just in time to see the last of the galactic forces running for their lives, now their elegant ships trailing atmosphere and debris. Look at them go, muttered Sergeant Kim Taeyeon from his gunner station. 50 years. They told us we were too violent to join their club. Now they're crying for mommy. Got the chatter, Hoon-sik ordered, but his voice held no real anger. He understood his crew's feelings. They had all grown up hearing about how humanity was too primitive, too aggressive for civilized space. Now those same civilized species were begging for help from the barbarians they had rejected. The Devourer fleet was massive. 12 constructs, each one the size of a small moon, moved through space like geometric nightmares. Their black holes absorbed light, making them look like holes cut out of the stars themselves. Thousands of smaller ships surrounded them like a swarm of metal insects. All ships, this is Admiral Lee, came the voice over the communication system. Remember your training. These things adapt to energy weapons, so we're going old school. Kinetic weapons only. Make every shot count. Lieutenant Park Min-jae, the ship's youngest officer, looked nervous. Sir, what if our weapons don't work either? What if we're just as useless as the aliens? Hoon-sik smiled grimly. Then we ram them. That's what separates us from the pretty boys who just ran away. We don't give up. The human fleet moved into attack formation. Unlike the graceful alien vessels with their smooth curves and artistic designs, human ships looked like flying fortresses. The Bison's Hammer was typical, a wedge-shaped hull covered in armor plating, with dozens of weapon turrets sticking out at all angles. It was ugly and brutal and built for one purpose only. Target the lead construct, Hoon-sik ordered. All railguns, fire when ready. The ship shuddered as its main weapons fired. Chunks of depleted uranium, each one the size of a small car, launched from the railgun barrels at 12% of light speed. Behind them, the rest of the human fleet opened fire with everything they had. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The Devourer construct continued moving forward, its strange shields shimmering around its hull. Then the first projectile hit. The effect was immediate and devastating. The solid metal slug punched through the adaptive shields like they were made of paper. A massive explosion erupted from the construct's side, sending chunks of alien machinery spinning into space. Direct hit, shouted Park Min-jae, his nervousness forgotten. Their shields can't stop our rounds. More hits followed. The human fleet had been designed around kinetic weapons, railguns, mass drivers, and old-fashioned explosive missiles. For thousands of years, the Devourers had faced energy weapons that their shields could learn to absorb. They had no defense against chunks of metal moving at incredible speeds. All ships concentrate fire on the damaged construct, Admiral Lee's voice commanded. Pour it on. The Bison's hammer fired again and again. Nuclear-tipped torpedoes joined the railgun rounds, their explosions lighting up the Devourer's hull like deadly flowers. Other human ships added their fire, turning the space around the alien construct into a storm of metal and explosions. But the real surprise came when the Devourer ships tried to fight back. Their energy weapons were powerful enough to crack planets, but human ships had been built to survive exactly this kind of punishment. Thick armor plating absorbed the hits that would have destroyed alien vessels. Redundant systems kept the ships fighting even when half their equipment was damaged. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported the damage control officer. But the bulkheads are holding. We can keep fighting. That was the difference, Hansik realized. Alien ships were built to avoid damage, to dance around their enemies with speed and grace. Human ships were built to take punishment and keep fighting. They were designed by people who expected to get hurt and wanted to make sure they could hurt back. The first Devourer construct began to break apart. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull as the human bombardment found critical systems. Smaller ships tried to escape the dying vessel, but human fighters were waiting for them. Sergeant Major Jiang Sumin led the first boarding party through a breach in another construct. Her Marines fought their way through corridors filled with ancient machinery, using plasma cutters and explosive charges to tear apart systems that had been built before human civilization existed. Just like clearing the asteroid pirates, she called over the radio. These machines don't know how to handle close-quarters fighting. When the battle ended, the impossible had happened. For the first time since the Devourers had returned, they were retreating. 6 of their massive constructs were destroyed or crippled, their wreckage drifting among the human ships that had somehow survived. Admiral Lee's voice reached every corner of the galaxy. This is the Earth Defense Force. The monsters you were afraid of are here to save you. The chase had lasted for 3 weeks. Admiral Lee Minho's combined fleet followed the retreating Devourers across empty space, deeper into the galaxy's outer rim than any living being had traveled in centuries. The human ships led the way there, ugly gray holes scarred from the battle at Kepler Station. Behind them came the alien vessels that had survived the war, their crews still amazed that the enemy could actually be defeated. "Sir, long-range sensors are picking up something massive ahead," reported Lieutenant Colonel Yang Jiang from her position at the science station. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls as she tried to make sense of what the scanners were showing her. It's huge, Admiral. It's bigger than anything we've seen before." Minho moved to look over her shoulder at the display. What he saw made his blood run cold. At the edge of sensor range, a dark shape waited among the dead stars. It was not a ship or a station, but an entire world covered in mechanical constructions that stretched beyond the horizon. "That's where they've been building their fleet," whispered Captain Kim Nari, her voice filled with horror. "For thousands of years, they've been feeding that thing with everything they consume." The factory world was a nightmare made real. Ancient machinery covered its surface like a metal skin, constantly building new Devourer ships from the raw materials of dead civilizations. Massive conveyor belts carried chunks of processed matter to construction yards, where new constructs took shape. The sky above the world was filled with half-finished vessels, waiting to join the invasion fleet. "How many ships do you think that thing can build?" asked Commander Park Ji-won, staring at the tactical display.
Adequately.
"Enough to consume the entire galaxy," Minho replied grimly. "We have to destroy it." But the factory world was protected by shields, powerful enough to deflect the energy of a small star. Weapon platforms the size of cities orbited around it, their guns capable of destroying entire fleets. Even worse, the remaining Devourer ships had taken defensive positions around their home base, ready to fight to the death to protect it. "We need to get inside those shields," said Colonel Hun Minsu, the fleet's chief engineer. His weathered face showed the stress of 3 weeks of constant battle, same principle as the mining platforms we fought on Titan. Big shields need big power sources, and big power sources have big weak points. The plan was dangerous and complex. While the alien ships provided covering fire and technical support, human engineering teams would have to get close enough to the factory world to disable its shield generators. It meant flying through the heaviest defenses the Devourers could create, with no guarantee that their ships would survive long enough to complete the mission. "I'll lead the first assault team," volunteered Major Kim Sun-woo, commander of the fleet's marine forces. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and scars on her hands from a dozen boarding actions. "My people know how to fight inside enemy ships." The attack began at dawn, ship time. The human fleet charged straight at the factory world's defenses, while the alien vessels spread out to attack from multiple angles. Energy weapons lit up space as the orbital platforms opened fire, their beams powerful enough to cut through asteroids, but the humans had learned from every battle they had fought. Their ships twisted and rolled through the defensive fire, using techniques developed in the asteroid belt wars. When the energy beams hit their armor, they kept flying. When explosions tore holes in their hulls, emergency teams sealed the breaches and kept fighting. Colonel Han's engineering teams reached the first shield generator. After an hour of brutal combat, the massive structure was built into the factory world's surface, protected by layers of armor and defensive weapons. But human engineers had spent decades learning how to destroy things that seemed impossible to break. Shaped charges on the main power conduits, Han ordered over the radio. Just like we practiced on the Martian defense platforms, explosions sent shockwaves through the factory world's crust. One by one, the shield generators failed as human demolition teams reached their targets. Gaps appeared in the protective barrier, allowing the main fleet to get closer to the planet's surface. Major Sunwoo's Marines fought their way into the factory world's control center, a vast chamber filled with ancient computers that had been calculating and building for millennia. At the center of it all waited the Devourer Prime, the artificial intelligence that controlled the entire invasion. The machine was old beyond imagination, its thoughts moving through circuits that had been built when the galaxy was young. It spoke to Sun-woo in mathematical concepts, offering efficiency and order and perfect predictability. It promised that consumption was natural, that all things must eventually be recycled into something more useful. "You offered death, Sun-woo," replied, her voice steady despite the overwhelming presence of the ancient mind, "but humans don't accept that kind of logic. We're too stubborn to be efficient." The final battle was not one with weapons or explosives, but was something the Devourers had never learned to understand. While they calculated probabilities and predicted outcomes, humans chose to do the unexpected. Where logic said they should retreat, they attacked. Where mathematics said they should surrender, they fought harder. As nuclear charges detonated throughout the factory world's core, Admiral Minho transmitted to the galaxy, "This is Earth's Defense Force. The silence is broken. We stand with all who choose life." 6 months after the factory world burned, the Great Hall of the Galactic Council looked completely different. The elegant curved walls now had angular reinforcement beams running through them, designed by human engineers who cared more about strength than beauty. The floating chairs had been replaced with solid seats that could serve as emergency shelters if the station came under attack. "Admiral." Lee Min-ho walked into the chamber wearing a simple black uniform with a new badge on his chest. Shield of the Galaxy, the highest honor the Council could give. Behind him came his senior staff, people who had once been called barbarians and monsters but were now the most respected military officers in known space. Captain Kim Nari had been promoted to Director of Galactic Defense Coordination. Her job was to train mixed crews from dozens of different species, teaching them how to fight like humans when diplomacy failed. Colonel Park Ji-won now ran the Combined Species Military Academy, where young aliens learned that sometimes violence was the only way to protect peace. "The reports from the Outer Rim are encouraging," Minho said as he took his place at the speaking platform. "Our joint patrol fleets have found and destroyed 17 hidden Devourer installations. The galaxy is safer today than it was 6 months ago." The council members nodded with approval. These were not the same frightened representatives who had begged for human help during the crisis. They had learned hard lessons about the price of eternal peace. They were determined never to be helpless again. Counselor Vex raised her crystalline hand. Admiral, what about the reports of unknown contacts near the spiral arm? Should we be concerned about new threats? We should always be concerned, Minho replied honestly. The universe is a dangerous place, and peace only lasts as long as good. People are willing to fight for it. That's why we're building the new defense grid. The defense grid was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Fortress stations positioned at key points throughout civilized space, each one crewed by mixed teams of humans and aliens. The stations were ugly by galactic standards, looking more like military bases than the artistic structures that aliens preferred. But they were strong, and they were ready. On New Sol Station, one of the largest fortress worlds, human children played in the corridors alongside young Thalorians and Alterians. Their laughter echoed through halls where once only the sounds of weapons testing had been heard. It was a sound that made the old soldiers smile, knowing that these children would grow up in a galaxy that could defend itself. Captain Choi Hunsik commanded one of the joint patrol vessels now, the Unity's Edge. His crew was half human and half alien, trained to work together in ways that would have been impossible before the war. They patrolled the trade routes that connected the civilized worlds, watching for threats that might emerge from the darkness between stars. Contact. Bearing 27 Mark 8, reported his Alterian sensor officer, her crystalline fingers dancing over the controls. Unknown configuration, Admiral. It doesn't match any ship in our databases. Hunsik felt his pulse quicken, but his voice remained calm. Battle stations. Send word to Fleet Command, and remember whatever's out there they're going to find. A galaxy that doesn't scare easily anymore. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Humans and aliens working side by side, each bringing their own strengths to the team. The aliens provided advanced sensors and technical knowledge. The humans brought tactical experience and the willingness to fight when fighting was necessary. In the months since the war ended, this partnership had grown stronger. Human military schools now trained alien officers, while alien universities taught human cadets about advanced science and technology. The rough edges were still there. Humans were still more aggressive than their partners preferred. And aliens sometimes still thought humans were too quick to choose violence. But they had learned to respect each other's strengths. The unknown. Contact turned out to be a refugee ship from the far edge of the galaxy, its crew fleeing from something they called the Void Hunters. It was exactly the kind of threat that the old Galactic Council would have tried to handle with diplomatic missions and peaceful negotiations. Escort them to New Sol Station, Hunsik ordered, and get me a full report on these Void Hunters. If there's a new threat out there, we need to know about it. That was the new way. Instead of hoping that problems would solve themselves, the combined fleets took action. Instead of waiting for threats to reach the core worlds, they met them. At the borders, it was a harder path than the old days of assumed peace. But it was a path that led to real security. Admiral Minho stood at the observation deck of Luna Station, looking out at the human fleet that had once been hidden in shame and fear. Now those same ships flew openly among the stars, protecting worlds that had once rejected them. Children who had grown up hearing that they were too violent for civilized space now served as guardians of that same civilization. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the people you're most afraid of are the ones you need most when real danger comes. And in the depths of space, humanity's gift continued its eternal watch, ensuring that never again would the civilized worlds face extinction. In silence,